Teachers, when did karmic justice finally come to that one troublesome student? I had a student that was a real twerp. Always doing things he was not supposed to and purposely causing conflict with other students. He was a daily headache. One day in class he stole a candied pepper from one of Hispanic students and ate it. It was a very hot pepper, not sure of the type. At first I didn't notice cause he is a sneaky kid. He started to sweat and his sweat turned to tears. "I need to go to the bathroom," he cried, my mouth. I went to investigate and found out what happened. The karma payback plan was now collecting, and I refused to let him go get a drink and continued with the math instruction in hopes of teaching him a lesson. For the next few minutes he pleaded with me to go to the nurse with tears running down his face. I said I do not negotiate with thieves. He started running around in circles. It wasn't until he started sobbing and crying out "I just want my mom," that I finally felt bad and said, "If I take you to the nurse, are you ever going to act out in class again?" He promised that he wouldn't, and he never did. The tears and sobbing in front of his peers broke his ego and he was a stellar student for the rest of the school year. I teach middle school. Next story. Not a teacher, but one time when I was in kindergarten, a kid looked me straight in the eyes, bit himself on the wrist, hard, and ran to the teacher and blamed me. That little crap. They sent me to the principal's office, my mom was called down, I got yelled at and cried. A week later, the kid did it again. And the teacher saw him do it. Felt so good to have the principal apologizing profusely to me, while that little crap head got a mouthful from his parents. Next story. I coached middle school football. Some kids have come out of their shell by then, others have not, but at least most of the early bloomers were jerks to make life hell for everybody. The team's starting halfback was one of those jerks. He gave a defensive lineman hell, and since everybody thought he was cool they gave him hell right along with him. The D lineman was a big guy but not aggressive or outgoing, still just in his shell really. He did fine out there because he was a big guy but hardly played to his potential. The little running backs took their Napoleon complexes out on the big guy by running by him and shouting "pussy" every time he failed to stop them. Rather than fight back to make the play he would just ignore it and line up and try again the next play. One day the whole thing just clicked for the big guy and he started making plays. He learned to get off his blockers and form tackle and attack the ball carrier. It was a cool thing to see. He loved it. When he really started getting into a groove I started running the jerk halfback right at the blooming D lineman and watched him plant the guy in the ground with a thud every time. It was just getting easier as I made sure they ran the same play at him play after play. Soon, bruised and beaten, the jerk halfback asked, "How many times are you going to run this play?" And I responded, "Once for every time you called him a pussy." Next story. Last year had a 7-year-old in my class who was just a pain. He's the only child I've ever taught who I've actually disliked. He would throw things around the classroom, pinch other children, stab them with pencils, he was rude to everyone and would always blame it on someone else. Talking to his parents wouldn't help because they believed everything he said, even over adults who had actually witnessed him doing it. They would give excuses and say that other children were blaming him or that he was being picked on. There was nothing wrong with this child other than he had been brought up with no consequences in his life. Anyway, one break time he was harassing another child and I guess they just had enough and this usually mild-mannered child just punched him in the stomach, causing the horrible child to wet himself. When following the indecent up, all of the other children who witnessed it, around 5 or 6, completely closed ranks and denied that it ever happened. I can't usually condone when children hit back, it causes so many other problems, but you better believe all the adults that have had to deal with this child were rooting for the hitter. Next story. I taught a comparative anatomy animal dissection lab section back in college. I had one kid in a section, let's call him Kevin, who never listened to dissection instructions and just dove in with a scalpel, dicing and chopping and generally mutilating most of the internal organs. His first karmic warning came when we were dissecting squid, and he got squid juice on himself. Smelled awful for the rest of that class. However, he kept on ignoring instructions and hacking away. And this time, karmic justice struck on our very last dissection project, the fetal pig. Kevin really wanted to see the pig's brain. Kevin couldn't get through to the skull, so he started whacking away at it with the butt of a flat pry knife. I told him to stop, but he had to give it one last, mighty thwack. Crack. The skull breaks, and rubbery piglet brain bits come flying out everywhere. Mostly over Kevin, splattering him. Unfortunately, while protesting my refusal to let him dice this piglet into pancetta cubes, Kevin had his mouth open. Thankfully, preserved pig brain, ingested orally, seemed to have a calming, subduing effect on Kevin for the last couple classes. TLDR, don't jerk in dissections unless you're willing to swallow. Next story. When I was younger the teacher got tired of the kid who kept disrupting the class and she gave extra homework to everyone in the class except the troublesome kid and made all the student write, "Thanks for the extra homework, name." Somehow he stopped believing he was cool after that. Next story. In high school we had this little crap kid named Brandon. I only had one class with him, but that class is where the story happened. It was 11th grade geography, and our teacher was one of the nicer teachers I can remember. Brandon would always push her buttons like I'm sure he did to everyone. He would never take it too far, I think he just loved the attention of getting the whole class to look at him or laugh at what he was doing. He would make little noises, tell stupid jokes during lecture, pretend to sleep and snore, and any other stupid irritating crap that you could think of. Our teacher, she was quite a patient lady, but you could tell by mid-year that she had enough of his crap as anyone. She couldn't even really punish him because Brandon loved that kind of attention and it made him all the happier. The few times he got too much, she would give him detention and a couple times send him to the office, which just made him more giddy. We had a very tame office staff and they would keep him in the office for an hour or something and just let him out. She tried everything and you could tell she was at the end of her wits. A few weeks after 9/11, some kid thought it would be funny to call in a bomb threat. They cleared the school and went locker by locker. They found nothing, of course, and we went back in. As soon as we sat down in that geography class, an office staff member came into our class and went up to our teacher and whispered something into her ear. I still remember the calm look on her face. In the most professional way, she looked over at Brandon and said, "You're being called to the office." She went on with the rest of the class completely normal. They had found quite a bit of weed in Brandon's locker and as a result he was expelled over it. Next story. Had a kid who was a real douche nozzle when I taught 5th. This kid, let's call him Ray, had one of those moms who refused to hold him accountable for anything. It was always, some other kid did it, Ray was just protecting himself, Ray just wanted to fit in, Ray was being targeted. Also, she was one of those kids who would ask Ray if he were guilty, and take his no as incontestable truth. She would say, "My son doesn't lie to me." "Oh really? Your kid doesn't lie? Your kid and Jesus? All kids lie." Anyway, I had a full caseload as a special ed teacher, so I got a paraprofessional, call him Steve. Ray hated Steve. Had some kind of issue with male authority figures. One day Ray gets in trouble coming back from recess. Steve reprimanded him, verbally. By the time Ray makes it to the classroom, he's saying how Steve got in his face and shouted at him, "Nope." He asks to go talk to the principal, yay, Ray's gone for at least 5 minutes, tells the principal how Steve grabbed his arm. When mom comes and gets him, now he's saying Steve pushed him. Next day we get a phone call. Ray's mom and grandma are coming in and want a meeting with Steve and the principal to discuss how Steve choked Ray. Steve's freaking out. Other kids were there, but no adults, no cameras, how can he prove his innocence? I tell him, go to the meeting and before anybody says anything, have Ray share what happened. Steve came back smiling. As soon as one story came out, everybody else is disagreeing. Well, Ray told me, but Ray told me. I would have loved to see the mom's face as her kid is proven a liar in front of everyone.